Okay. Good night, good morning, whatever we're doing. I'm sorry it took so long. I meant to start at 11:30 Eastern, but we're a little behind. So the show for today is we're just going to talk about the ministry of the lector or the reader during Mass. And what I kind of wanted to talk about, because I've been thinking about this a long time, because I did voice acting stuff for a while, and because I've been reading aloud and doing audiobooks and all sorts of things for people for a long time. When I came into the church, I really enjoyed the function of the lector. And it didn't take me very long before I realized that almost everywhere the ministry of lector is terribly done. So I sort of wanted to talk about lectors, readers at Mass. I sort of wanted to look at what the church says about this ministry. I wanted to look at maybe some theological and historical texts on this ministry, because I have a couple that are somewhat long. I don't know how much time we're going to put into that. And then I sort of wanted to talk about steps to improve this ministry, both in general, so at your parish, and in particular, so if you actually make work to improve this ministry, sort of how are you going to do it? Because it doesn't do any good. Oh, somebody says I ignored a Discord DM. Well, let's go look. What did you say on Discord? People get me on Discord, they don't realize I work maybe the equivalent of, on top of my normal job, which is about 40 to 50 hours a week, I then manage property for another 5 to 15 to 20 hours a week. So I see things and I note that they're there, but I don't necessarily do them. So let's see what you have on here. Oh, hold on. Well, I won't tell people what you said, but well, it's either you or no. Okay, I see you. I'll get to you. Just I'll get to you after the stream. Okay. So anyway, so look, let's see. How do I want to start this? Okay, I know how this will be fun. Let's just pick up. Oh, let's just pick up any Mass, any old Mass. I'm gonna find some Mass somewhere in some parish online, and I want to talk to you about the problem. Okay, we'll start with the problem because it's funny. Mass. Okay. And then I'll filter it over 20 minutes. So we definitely get a Mass and we don't get people complaining about the Mass. And no, that's going to be Mike Schmidt reading it. We're not going to do that. Okay, Solemnity of All Saints. Who's reading the reading? Okay, this is good. Okay, this is Catholic TV Network. This got 30,000 views. I'm going to show you the problem. Okay. There's a lot of problems, but this is pretty normal. So let's see. Setting. Okay. Share screen. They changed the Catholic Mass today. Here we go. Sure. They changed the setup, so I have to fiddle around for a second. Okay. All right. Okay. So you ought to recognize how this goes if you've been to Mass. And I just want you to, so it's Solemnity of All Saints. So we just did this. All right, I want you to observe the reading character of this. And this is going to be relatively clear because it's mic'd and recorded.
A reading from the book of Revelation. I, John, saw another angel come up from the east, holding the seal of the living God. He cried out in a loud voice to the four angels who were given power to damage the land and the sea. Do not damage the land or the sea or the trees until we put the seal on the foreheads of the servants of our God. I heard the number of those who had been marked with the seal, 144,000 marked from every tribe of the children of Israel. After this, I had a vision of great multitude, which no one could count, from every nation, race, people, and tongue. They stood before the throne and before the Lamb, wearing white robes and holding palm branches in their hands. They cried out in a loud voice, "Salvation comes from our God, who is seated on the throne, and from the Lamb." All the angels stood around the throne and around the elders and the four living creatures. They prostrated themselves before the throne, worshiped God, and exclaimed, "Amen. Blessing and glory, wisdom and thanksgiving, honor, power, and might, to be our God forever and ever. Amen." Then one of the elders spoke up and said to me, "Who are these wearing white robes, and where did they come from?" I said to him, "My Lord, you are the one who knows." He said to me, "These are the ones who have survived the time of great distress. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God.
Okay, so that's the first reading. So the problem with that is that that's god awful. So look, and I'm not going to make fun. We'll see the second one, see how bad that is. But and I picked this at random. I didn't pre-pick one. I just went on YouTube right now. So and this is keep in mind that recording was on a microphone directly fed into this stream. So that's much better than what you usually get. What you usually get is you're in the pew and you have to read that. So what was the problem with that? Well, let's look at about 15 different things. Now, look, this is entirely apart from the woman question. So the question of if women should be lectors. If the church wants to allow that, then the church allows it. That's above my pay grade. What isn't above my pay grade is whether or not you're doing it. So if you're not able to read, you shouldn't be up there. Now, was this bad? She read the words, but I mean, let's pick in the middle.
Shall come up from the east, holding the seal of the living God. He cried out in a loud voice to the four angels who were given power to damage the land and the sea.
He cried out to the east and the four angels who were given power over the land and the sea. It's mush. It's gobbledygook. You don't read aloud properly. I mean, many people do, but you don't properly read aloud to people in this way. It is inappropriate, and it doesn't communicate to people what it is you're trying to say. And we have an instituted part of the Mass where we read out loud to people in order that they hear it after the fashion of a word being proclaimed. Okay? So in as far as the ministry is conducted this way, it's awful. All right. And let's go on to the second person. Let's go on to the second person and see how bad they are. And because I'm doing this, I'm not doing this to make fun of people. Okay. Oh, goodness gracious. I don't know.
A reading from the first letter of St. John.
Oh, geez.
Beloved, see what love the Father has bestowed on us, that we may be called the children of God. Yet so we are. The reason the world does not know us is that it did not know him. Beloved, we are God's children now. What we shall be has not yet been revealed. We do know that when it is revealed, we shall be like him, for we shall see him as he is. Everyone who has this hope based on him makes himself pure, as he is pure. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Okay, so that one was less rushed. We didn't have the problem of but it's mute. It's it's not going to work. That's not how you read things to people. Okay. And let's see, just so we're not too hard on the women. Let's see how the cleric does it. So I don't know if this is a deacon or a priest, but it's not unusual for the clergy to be not that great at it either. So let's see how he handles it. I just want to know.
According to Matthew, glory to you, O Lord. When Jesus saw the crowds, he went up the mountain, and after he had sat down, his disciples came to him. He began to teach them, saying, "Blessed are the poor in spirit, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven. Blessed are they who mourn, for they will be comforted. Blessed are the meek, for they will inherit the land. Blessed are they who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied. Blessed are the merciful, for they will be shown mercy. Blessed are the clean of heart, for they will see God. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they will be called the children of God. Blessed are they who are persecuted for the sake of righteousness,
I don't
for theirs is the
know
kingdom
why
of
they
heaven.
have the.
Blessed are you when they insult you and persecute you and utter every kind of evil against you falsely because of me. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven." The gospel of the Lord.
Praise to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Okay, that one wasn't so bad. So Father presumably has had enough practice reading out loud that he knows how to read somewhat better. So that wasn't so bad. Although Father does have problems with distinction and delivery. There should be some variance, but it's not bad. It was clear. So that was good. I don't know why, if you've got a parish that does, this is just a pet peeve.
Righteousness, for theirs is the kingdom.
Look at this.
Blessed are they who
had this
hunger and
problem.
thirst for righteousness, for they will be satisfied.
Okay.
Blessed
Here,
are the
this.
merciful, for
What
they
is
will.
what is this? What is this? Why are the lectors meandering? Why are the lectors malingering in the background for this part? I don't know. If you have a parish that does that, tell them to stop doing that. Okay. So I want to talk about this ministry, and I want to think about it. So let's see. I've got a couple of things to read on it, and we can talk about it. Let's see. I had Catholic Encyclopedia on the Lector. Well, I did. I'll get it again. That's fine. There it is. Okay. Catholic Encyclopedia does a good job going over the history. And I've got another book on minor orders, but we can switch as we need to. Also, again, if anybody wants to ask any questions, just put them in the chat and I'll get to them. Okay. Lector. A lector, reader, in the West is I think this is cleric, is a cleric having the second of the four minor orders. In all Eastern churches also, readers are ordained to a minor order preparatory to the diaconate. The primary reason for a special class of readers was the need of some persons sufficiently educated to be able to read the books in church. For the Christians continued the Jewish practice of reading the sacred books publicly. The first mention of a Christian liturgical reader is by Justin Martyr, died about 165, in his first apology, blah, blah, blah. The homily known as Second Clement to the Corinthians also contains a reference to Lector, on agnoskon. The position of reader was honorable and dignified. It involved a higher standard of education than that of most offices. Although Justin says that the bishop preached the sermon, it appears that the reader himself often went on to expound what he had read. As the idea obtained that a special blessing and dedication should be given to everyone who performs an office for the church, the reader, too, was instituted by prayers and some ceremony. Readers were blessed and set apart, as were the fossores who dug graves and the notari who kept registers and widows. All the group of rituals that depend on the so-called apostolic constitutions contain the right of ordaining readers, etc., etc. During the first centuries, all the lessons in the liturgy, including the epistle and gospel, were read by the lector. Oh, interesting. Okay. Cornelius I, in a letter to Fabius of Antioch, mentions that the Church of Rome had 42 acolytes and 52 exorcists, readers, and doorkeepers. In the 4th century in Africa, the Church of Cirta had 4 priests, 3 deacons, 4 subdeacons, and 7 readers. The account of the persecution, Gesta apud Xenophilium, printed in the appendix of Optus and blah, 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 describes how the readers kept the sacred books which the magistrate demanded to be given up. An old set of Western canons ascribed wrongly to a supposed Council of Carthage in 398, but really of the 6th century, gives forms for all ordinations. Canon 8 is about our subject, saying thus, "When a reader is ordained, let him read, saying to him thus, receive this and be the spokesman, relator, of the word of God, and you shall have, if you do your work faithfully and usefully, a part with those who have administered the word of God." But gradually, the lectorate lost all importance. The deacon obtained the office of reading the gospel. In the West, the epistle became the privilege of the subdeacon. In the Eastern churches, this and other lessons are still supposed to be read by a lector, but everywhere his office, as all minor orders, may be supplied by a layman. The lector is still mentioned twice in the Roman Missal. In the rubrics at the beginning, it is said that if Mass be sung without deacon and subdeacon, a lector wearing a surplice may sing the epistle in the usual place, but at the end he does not kiss the celebrant's hand. On Good Friday, the morning service begins with a prophecy read by a lector at the place where the epistle is usually read. Everywhere, the order of reader has become merely a stepping stone to major orders and a memory of early days. In the Roman Rite, it is the second minor order. The minor orders are conferred during Mass after the first lesson, but they may be given apart from Mass on Sundays or doubles in the morning. The lectorate involves no obligation of celibacy or of any other kind. The Byzantine office will be found in the Euclogion Tomega, blah, blah, blah. The Arminians, Gregorian, and Uniate have adopted the Roman system of 4 minor orders exactly. Their right of ordaining a reader also consists in handing to him the book of the epistles. Okay. So let's see. A couple of things to note on that. So the office of reader has been everywhere slowly either phased into an office for lay people or absorbed into the deacon and the priest, or the subdeacon. These are not really necessary to the role. Let's see what else. Okay, I have another document that sort of talks about general norms. It's a compilation by a parish, but it's decent. And then after that, we can talk more about how to actually prepare. And I'm going to try to do that with everyone. Let's see. I think this is the one. I hope so. Yeah. Okay. I'm using this because it's a compilation. It's using stuff both from the general instruction of the Roman Missal and at the introduction to the lectionary for Mass. But if I read those, it would take hours and hours. So let's just go through this. Proclamation of the Word. The proclamations of the Word of, excuse me, need to zoom in. The proclamation of the Word of God is truly a service to the church. Lectors bring the living Word of God to the liturgical assembly. The ministry of the Word should, therefore, be treated seriously and with great dignity. The Word of God is not merely read during the liturgy, it is proclaimed, yet not with theatrical show. Effective proclamation involves the delivery of the message with clarity, conviction, and appropriate pace. It demands the ability to evoke faith in others by demonstrating one's own faith. Proclamation is a special ministry which presupposes faith. It also rouses faith in those who hear the word proclaimed. So something I've ran into when I have seen, and it's even a problem in this parish's own lectors, is that, and this is my guess because I just see the results and I'm looking at the instructions. I think some people take the direction against theatrical reading to mean that you don't read well, that you don't read with any variance of voice or personality, as it were. And it's a real problem. And I'll try to go over it a little bit because I'm not going to say I'm the best, best voice narrator in the world or anything, but like you got to have a little bit, you have to actually, because it's even saying, every proclamation involves the delivery of the message with clarity, conviction, and appropriate pace. Well, that already involves a certain amount of internalizing of the text and then an expression of the text in, through your having taken it in. It demands the ability to evoke faith in others by demonstrating one's own faith. So again, you actually have to have received the text, and then you actually have to be expressing the text in some kind of evocative way. So when you see things that say, well, don't, be theatrical or don't be over the top, or sometimes people say somehow your personality should not be involved. This, I don't think, has to mean that you read it in a way that can't be absorbed, that just can't be the ministry. That's I think that's a mistake that people want. I think the real mistake people wander into is they do no preparation whatsoever and they don't know how to read. But let's say that you do know how to read. I think there's this bizarre idea that you're not going to be there as you're going to be, as it were, be some kind of depersonalized thing. And I'm telling you, that doesn't work. All right. 3. Ideally, the assembly should listen to the proclamation of the scriptures and not read alongside in a missalette. In the act of communal listening, the worshipers experience not only unity among themselves, but also the presence of Christ speaking to them through the word. Pastors and lectors need, however, to be attentive to the special needs of the hearing impaired. This is the idea of sign language in Mass. I have no problem with sign language in Mass, but that's not really the point. So look, and this happens a lot even in English Masses. If the ministry of reader is so bad that you need to read along in a missalette, something's wrong. So the ministry of reading is in a certain way supposed to give you the experience of the word being proclaimed to you as something to be heard in the ear. All right. So if you need to read it, something's gone wrong. Something's failed. All right. And for whatever reason, that is to say, if you've got somebody with a terrible accent, if you've got somebody who reads in a monotone way, if you've got somebody who reads too fast, if you've got somebody who reads, you can't hear it, any of those. If the situation is you have to read it or you don't even get it, something's wrong. 4. All liturgical ministers, including lectors, must be fully initiated with respect of sacraments of baptism, confirmation, and Eucharist, be properly trained for their ministry,
and be practicing Catholics whose lives witness to the word which they proclaim. This ministry of the word requires skill in public reading, knowledge of the principles of liturgy, and an understanding of the scriptures. On special occasions and for pastoral reasons, a young person who is not yet fully initiated, that is to say confirmed, and has received First Eucharist, may be permitted to lector during a liturgy. Proper training, however, is expected. There's never been a case in my entire time in the church, in fact, in my entire life, with very few exceptions, that somebody under the age of certainly 13 reads well. And I don't care if it's in the church or not. They just can't. They can't do it. I'm sure that there are some good children who read very well out loud to people, but no prepubescent child is any good at it. And I would say, for the most part, nobody under the age of young adult is very good at reading aloud to people. They just don't have the development. It can be so, but usually they are annoying and terrible at it and should not be doing it. Most of the time, what happens is somebody wants a child to go up there because this mass is somehow personally significant, or it's a confirmation mass, and they're going to read it as if they're the valedictorian of confirmation or something. That should not be done. They are not competent most of the time, and they're never trained ever. So don't do that. Lectors receive a blessing at the beginning of their ministry. See Book of Blessings, etc. You should use that if you're not instituted. Those who are presently lectors should periodically participate in enrichment programs. Yeah, so you should have training. So if your parish has, and I've never seen this anywhere, if your parish has no training, it should. To make the service of the word effective, all lectors are expected to be prepared for their ministry. Preparation should be spiritual, scriptural, and practical. Spiritual prayer involves prayer over the text and reflection on its message. Scriptural preparation involves understanding the text. Practical preparation involves mastering difficult words, learning the right pronunciations, and practicing the delivery of the text aloud, ideally in the presence of someone who is able to critique the delivery. This is never done and should be done. Immediate preparation is also expected of all lectors. This requires arriving in ample time before the liturgy and locating the readings in the lectionary. According to the tradition and teachings of the Church, the readings, other than the Gospel, are proclaimed by lay ministers. Proper measures must therefore be taken to ensure that there are certain suitable lay people who have been trained to carry out this ministry. The universal prayers are part of the liturgy of the word. When no deacon is present, the lector announces the intentions from the ambo. God speaks to the faith community at worship through persons, actions, and objects. To ensure the pastoral effectiveness of the liturgy of the word, it is important to pay full attention to the symbols of the liturgy. Symbols that are integral to any celebration of the word are thus the lectors, the books, the ambo, and the processions. A brief word on each of these is in order. The lector ministers as one of the worshiping assembly and is expected to participate in the entire liturgy. Within the Mass, each lector must participate actively in the entire liturgy. It is inappropriate for a lector to participate actively only in the liturgy of the word. I assume this means coming in and leaving. The word is contained in permanent, dignified, and well-bound books, the lectionary and the book of the Gospels. The readings are always proclaimed from these liturgical books. Non-biblical readings are never to be substituted for the readings or responsorial psalm. The word of God is not to be proclaimed from a missalette or participation aid, both of which are transitory or throwaway materials. The ambo is the symbol of the presence of the Word of God in the church, just as the altar is the symbol of the sacrament of the Eucharist. The liturgy of the Word takes place at the ambo. The ambo is to be used for the proclaimed Word, namely the readings from sacred Scripture, the Gospels, the homily, and the intentions of the universal prayers. The responsorial psalm is from the sacred Scripture and ideally is chanted from the ambo by the cantor. ministry of music. An integral part of the celebration of the Word of God is the responsorial psalm and the gospel acclamation, Alleluia. Psalmody is designed to be sung. It loses much of its power when it is recited. Since the responsorial psalm at Mass is part of the liturgy of the Word, it is appropriate that it be sung read from the ambo. The psalm can be sung in a variety of ways: responsorial, antiphonally, part sung, part recited. Lectors should check with the musicians beforehand as to whether anything is expected of them. The gospel acclamation is an acclamation and is always to be sung. If it is not sung, it is omitted. The leadership of the music ministry properly belongs to the musicians. It is preferable for a cantor to sing the responsorial psalm, or at least the people's response. If the responsorial song cannot be sung, then it is to be recited by the lector in such a way as to foster meditation. Ritual action. Among the actions in the liturgy of the Word, processions are important. The lector takes part in the entrance procession of the Mass. If a deacon is not present, the lector will carry the Book of Gospels slightly elevated and place the Book of Gospels upon the altar. The lectionary is not carried in procession, but is resting on the ambo at the beginning of Mass. After the second reading and the accompanying pause, all stand for the singing of the gospel acclamation. During that time, the deacon or priest carries the Book of Gospels from the altar to the ambo in procession. He may be accompanied by servers carrying candles and a thurifer. The gospel procession is an important ritual action of the liturgy of the Word, even though it may not be expressed fully or at every liturgy. Incense may be used in the liturgy of the Word. When incense is used, traditionally the Book of the Gospels is incensed before the gospel is proclaimed. The posture of standing highlights the fact that the gospel reading enjoys a preeminent place among the scripture readings. The Book of Gospels is not carried in the recessional. As the symbolism here reveals, we take God's word with us as we leave to announce the gospel of the Lord by our lives. Silence. In order to enable the assembly to ponder and reflect on the word proclaimed, a slight pause should be made after stating a reading from, etc., and before the word of the Lord. A brief period of silence should be allowed after the responsorial psalm. Seating. Lectors need to be seated in a place which allows for easy access to the ambo, preferably among the assembly. At the time of the liturgy of the Word, the lector approaches the ambo slowly and with reverence. If the lector must pass in front of the altar, she bows to the altar before proceeding to the ambo. No bows are needed between readings, but only when passing in front of the altar. All movements in the liturgy are performed with dignity and grace. They are never hurried. After the readings, universal prayers when deacon is not present, the lector returns to his or her seat in a similar manner. Proclaiming the word. Lectors begin to read by saying a reading from the book of Exodus or whatever, as written in the lectionary. Do not add words such as the first reading, etc. If the responsorial psalm is recited, lectors should begin the recitation with the antiphon. Announcing responsorial psalm should not be done. Ministers of the word must not add or change any words of the texts. The title of the reading, such as a reading from the book of Exodus, and the ending, the word of the Lord, should be distinguished from the reading itself. Lectors do this by observing a very slight pause after the former and before the latter phrase. The same tone of proclamation should be maintained for the word of the Lord. Anything that might distract from the proclaimed word, such as leaning on the ambo, hands in pockets, or shuffling from one foot to the other, should be avoided. The lectionary or book of the Gospels should not be lifted off the ambo while saying the word of the Lord. The lector should never do anything to draw attention to him or herself at any time. Again, I still don't think that this should indicate a failure of reading. I think this means more like gesticulations, etc. Clothing should be appropriate for the occasion. modest and in keeping with the dignity of the ministry. All right, so that's the end on that. Oh, hello, Dominic Connis. I appreciate you here. Okay. So let's talk about this. So look, if you're going to read, it has to be done in a way that's dignified and appropriate. And I think most people who are serious about this understand that, but it has to be in a way that's successfully proclamatory. So let's see. What else do we have? We can talk about. So let's pull up some more cases. Let's find some more cases of masses. How about it? Because I want to see if anybody does a good job. Anybody whatsoever. Over 20 minutes. Yeah, let's find one. Oh, National Shrine of Divine Mercy. Let's see if they did a good job. I have found, by the way, it does not necessarily matter if it's oh, this one has a reader in a surplus. So let's see if he does a good job. Uh-oh. What is he doing? Why is I don't know. This one's wild. Let's see what this is going on. Why not? Dominic Connie says, I don't attend the Novus Ordo, but you're right on that. If someone is going to read the readings, they have to read them correctly, not like some black preacher at Baptist Church. So that's true. But I don't, so you do not go, I'm interested in everybody's experience. So my experience is not that they're doing them over dramatically or they've got too much oomph in them or it's too much about them. My experience overwhelmingly across the country in every English mass and to a certain extent even in Latin masses to the extent you can ever hear what they're reading is that they can't read, that they are not skilled at public reading is the problem. And that because of it, I don't care what language it is, they are not effective communicators of the word through this ministry. So here we go. Let me do another one. I found another mass. Okay. So here we go. I don't know what's going on with this one. The problem with this one is the priest yaps.
To Almighty God and to you,
Okay.
Blessed Mary, ever Virgin.
Yeah, I couldn't video it. Okay.
Constant gladness of being devoted to you, for it is full of lasting happiness to
Okay, I guess that's the normal prayer
of the Holy Spirit to God forever and ever.
Okay, so this is from the National Shrine of Divine Mercy, and it looks like they've got a minister who does the reading. So let's see how he does, because that almost never happens.
Amen. A reading from the book of Revelation.
We're not starting off good.
I, John, had a vision of an open door to heaven, and I heard the trumpet-like voice that had spoken to me before, saying, Come up here, and I will show you what must happen afterwards. At once I was caught up in spirit. A throne was there in heaven, and on the throne sat one whose appearance sparkled like jasper and carnelian. Around the throne was a halo as brilliant as an emerald. Surrounding the throne, I saw 24 other thrones, on which 24 elders sat. dressed in white garments and with gold crowns on their heads.
This is bad. Okay, so I don't want to, again, God bless his ministry. This is not how you read. Well, let me go back. This is not how you read out loud. Okay. Especially not if you're an instituted or standard minister doing this.
And I will show you what must happen afterwards.
And I will show you what must happen afterwards.
At once I was caught up in spirit.
At once I was caught up in spirit.
And that's not how you read.
And I will show you what must happen afterwards. At once I was caught up in spirit. I mean, clarity at least. So I don't know where this voice does not live up it doesn't live up back in the back of the throat. And it doesn't fall out of the mouth like marbles. That's not how we talk. That's not how we read aloud to people. Why? Why don't we read aloud to people like this? Because it's a ministry. Because it is an attempt to help people to hear the word of God in public through reading. So you don't go, blah, blah, blah. And what is that for? What is this for? And why is this important? It's because the liturgy of the word is the first third of the Mass or so. And, or sometimes even half the Mass, depending. And this is how you're going to do it? No, this is not how you're going to do it. This is an instituted minister. This is 10,000 people watched this Mass. This is the best he could do. It's not acceptable.
A throne was there in heaven. Is forever and ever.
No. Let's go to the second reading.
Holy Lord, mighty God.
No. Also, this one omits the first reading, even though in the United States we don't do that, but that's fine.
So he said, a nobleman went off to a distant country.
The priest does better. Almost universally, it's the priest, but we're talking about the lector. So let's see. What other options do we have? No, that'll be Mike Schmidt. He'll do it fine. Okay, let's see. Pick another one. Let's see if somebody can do it. This looks like it's from 2024. It looks like it was filmed in 1995. Okay. Let's see if this is going to be terrible. Can we get to Mass? Entrance. Okay. Okay, let's see if it's terrible.
A reading from the book of Revelation. I, John, had a vision of an open door to heaven, and I heard the trumpet-like voice that had spoken to me before, saying, "Come up here, and I will show you what must happen afterwards." At once I was caught up in spirit. A throne was there in heaven, and on the throne sat one whose appearance sparkled like jasper and carnelian. Around the throne was a halo as brilliant as an emerald. Surrounding the throne, I saw 24 other thrones.
This is better.
24 elders sat, dressed in white garments and with gold crowns on their heads. From the throne came flashes of lightning, rumblings, and peals of thunder. 7 flaming torches burned in front of the throne, which are the 7 spirits of God. In front of the throne was something that resembled a sea of glass like crystal. In the center and around the throne, there were 4 living creatures, covered with eyes in front and in back. The first creature resembled a lion. The second was like a calf. The third had a face like that of a man. And the fourth looked like an eagle in flight. The 4 living creatures, each of them with 6 wings, were covered with eyes inside and out. Day and night they do not stop exclaiming, "Holy, holy, holy is the Lord God Almighty, who was, who is, and who is to come." Whenever the living creatures give glory and honor and thanks to the one who sits on the throne, who lives forever and ever, the 24 elders fall down before the one who sits on the throne and worship him who lives forever and ever. They throw down their crowns before the throne, exclaiming, "Worthy are you, Lord our God, to receive glory and honor and power, for you created all things. Because of your will they came to be and were created." Verbum Domini.
A little weird to go to the chanted Latin at the end, but that's not too bad. So that wasn't too bad. And the reason that wasn't too bad is because he did the work of intoning, of giving a sense, of giving an intonation of the different parts of the sentences he was reading, which is what the problem is we've run into these 2 or 3 other ones we've looked at. I'm trying to find. Okay, I found what I want to look at. We'll look at this in a minute. Okay, so what I want to do, at the least I want to do on this session, because nobody's asking any questions. If you don't ask any questions, it's just going to be me yapping. What I want to do is at the very least, want to look at certain principles of presentation in verbal presentation, and then start to go through, because I've actually got to act as lector next week for the first reading, or next Sunday for the first reading. So I want to start to go through the basic preparation for doing that reading, at least read out loud. I won't do a chant reading now, because you almost never see a chant reading in English, but it can be done, and there's instructions for it. But we're not going to do that now. We're going to do just a basic out loud reading. So let's see. Okay. Let's see. So share. Where's this one? Okay. All right. So this is we're not going to watch the whole thing because it's 10 minutes long. But so this is a funny guy I found on the problem. So what do you mean when I say that people can't read? What do I mean?
Whenever I talk to a new voiceover talent, they tell me 2 things. I can read and I can talk. So I got this. And the first thing we find out is they can't read. Okay, I don't mean they can't read. Of course they can read. But what I do mean is they can't get through 30 seconds of copy without missing a word or hesitating.
Copy just means the material to be read. It's a voice acting term, usually used in advertising.
Some of these talents say they want to do audiobooks. Trust me, if you can't get through 30 seconds of voiceover copy, you're going to have a great deal of difficulty reading an entire book. The subject of reading is the 3rd rail in the world of education. It's distinctly possible for a student to get all the way through high school and not be able to read in a continuous flowing way and understand what they're reading. But I'm not going to go there. That's for the world of education to sort out. I'm just giving you my practical experience from directing and coaching talent for over 20 years. First of all, let me point out that reading and talking are not the same thing. When you're talking, you get to make up all the words, and you put your own inflection into each word to get the meaning across. And since you're making up the words, your phrasing automatically fits your breathing. So if you start to run out of air, you can cut the sentence short and breathe. Also, the words automatically flow from your ideas. We don't say anything to anyone unless there's some motivation behind that speech, some reason to say something. So that's natural speech. when you're reading. For example, a narration paragraph or a commercial copy. These are not your ideas. It's not the vocabulary that you would choose, and it may not be the phrasing that you would use. So adjusting your speech skills to written copy is actually a very tricky process. In another video, I talk about your speech nonverbal toolkit. These are the nonverbal things you do when you speak, such as talking louder or softer, raising or lowering the pitch of your voice, putting certain emotions in your read, and so forth. When you're reading someone else's writing, your mind has to calculate how to include all these variations of your voice. You also have to figure out where you're going to breathe. Actually, what you're doing is taking speech that has been condensed down to a piece of paper and reinflating it back to actual human communication. And that can be tricky. Here's the second challenge. Actually, our eyes were not made to read. Our eyes were made to scan the savannas of Africa for any movements that may help or hinder us. So in life, our eyes don't move in a linear direction. They bounce around looking for things that are changing. So if you're on a grassy plain in Africa and that grass over there starts to move, that usually means there's something there that you can eat or something there that might eat you. Think about driving down the highway. If all the cars are going exactly the same speed in their lanes, it's almost like they disappear. Then one of the cars decides to get off the highway, and you notice their blinker and the fact that the car is changing lanes. So that's how our eyes work in the real world. Okay, back to reading. Now in reading, you're asking for my eyes to move from left to right until the end of the line, and then back to the left again and back to the right again for the new line. So reading asks your eyes to follow a very linear path that is not natural. There are also different types of reading. Sometimes we read for form, and sometimes we read for content. When you first learn to read, you strictly read for form. See, spot, run. Run, spot, run. But very quickly in your education, you begin reading for content. If you're reading about Napoleon at the Battle of Waterloo, you really don't care exactly what the words are. You just want to find out what happened on that fateful day. Most of the reading we do in our daily lives involves reading for content. If you read a magazine, you're reading it for the information, not the way the words and sentences are formed. But if you're reading commercial copy, you need to read all the words exactly as they're written. You can't just vaguely get the idea of what the sentences are saying and make up your own words to describe it. You have to read the words verbatim, which is a skill you haven't practiced in years. Oh, and finally, most of the time we read to ourselves, and we read to ourselves 2 or 3 times faster than when we read out loud. Maybe this is happening to you. You'll be reading through some copy, and then suddenly you realize that what your mouth is saying and what your eyes are reading are not in sync. Your eyes have moved forward and are 3 or 4 lines down the paragraph, and your mouth is still on the first line. You can tell this is happening if you get lost in the copy, or if you insert words into the sentence that are in fact on the next line or several lines down. Okay, now we've defined some of the reading problems. Here are some solutions. First, you have to get your eyes and your mouth to synchronize. Remember in the 2nd grade when your teacher said, "Don't follow along with your finger and don't move your lips when you read"? Well, here's what I want you to do. I want you to follow along with your finger and move your lips when you read. By tracking along with what you're reading with your finger, you force your eyes to slow down and stay in the moment with the copy as you're reading. By the way, don't actually touch the paper or screen because the mic might pick up that tiny noise. Another technique that can help is to use some kind of straight edge like a ruler and only try to read 1 line of copy at a time. This prevents your eyes from
This
bouncing
won't-
forward
this
and
won't
picking up
work
stray
in-
words farther down in the copy, which happens quite frequently. I have another rule I use with my students.
Those
and I think it's
techniques won't
very
work, but we
important.
can talk about it.
And that is, when you're reading copy and you make a mistake, don't go back and correct your mistake. I have found that if when you stumble, you stop and go back and fix those words, that in fact, you're giving yourself permission to fail. And by the way, you're also reversing the direction your eyes are going in. So your eyes will tend to bounce around once again. So if you make a mistake, ignore it and keep reading. Trust me, your mind already knows you made the mistake. And the next time you read the copy, it will correct the mistake. You want to push yourself farther and farther through the copy
This
to
is
the point where you can read 30
preparatory
or
stuff.
60 seconds or more without a mistake.
We'll talk about it in a minute when we get
But
to a
this
concrete
requires
reading.
practice to develop the skill. Don't practice failing, practice succeeding. If you can get to the point where you can read a 30-second audition without hesitating or stumbling, then guess what? It will only take you 30 seconds to do a 30-second audition. Auditioning is competitive, and you often need to do many auditions to get a job. Improving your and jobs, much
not
video,
pertinent.
please subscribe bell
Okay.
to be notified.
All right. That's fine. The principles he has there are fine. It's not everything applicable. Okay. So look, we're going to go to, where's it at? That's not it. All right. I'm going to go pull up the reading for Sunday, and we're going to sort of talk about how you go through the process of preparing. Oh, I have stuff. Jesus says, something I've learned recently is that the Novus Order's official documents from near the beginning give instructions that strongly imply it is not to be assumed that female lectors read in the sanctuary. Well, it's not to be assumed because the Novus Order's official documents presuppose that no woman would be a lector. An instituted lector, but that's no longer the case. In this stream, I don't intend to talk about whether it's appropriate for women to be lectors. The church has allowed it, both de facto and de jure, for a long time, and that's not my pay grade. All I care about right now is the effective ministry of the word within the bounds of canonical law. If they're allowed to be up there, I want them to read well. If they're not allowed to be up there, I don't want them up there. But I'm not the Pope. If the Pope wants to allow them up there, he can allow them up there. But I'm going to say whoever's up there ought to be somewhat decent at it. And the problem is that everybody, including the men, are habitually bad at it. Liturgicae Instructiones talks about conferences of bishops needing to select a locum congruum equo mulieris in coetu liturgico annunciant. What is that? I don't. My Latin is congruum equo mulieris. It's about women in coetu liturgico. I don't know that document. So if you want to tell me what that is, please. All right, in any case, let's go over to the reading for next week. And if you bring it up, if you tell me what that is, we'll talk about it. My sight reading Latin, not great. Not great. If I sat down. Okay. Well, what is it though? Tell me what it is. Let's see. All right, this is the Liturgicae. All right, hold on. Oh, why not? Ah. I see. The conferences, yeah, you want, according to the norms established for these, okay, 7. I'll go ahead and pull it. I see what you're talking about. Okay. In conformity with norms traditional in the church, women, single, married, or religious, whether in churches, homes, convents, schools, or institutions for women, are barred from serving the priest at the altar. Well, that's done. So that's over. The Pope's, I don't, that's, this law is suppressed. According to the norms established for these matters, women, however, are allowed to A, proclaim the readings, accept the gospel. There to make sure that with the help of modern sound equipment, they can be comfortably heard by all. The conference, this is what you read. The conferences of bishops are to give specific directions on the place best suited for women to read the word of the gospel in the liturgical assembly. So I'm assuming that A is based on the precept articulated in 7, but the precept articulated in 7 has been suppressed. So, womp womp, as you say. Again, it's above my pay grade. If the Holy Father wants to allow it, the Holy Father wants to allow it. It's not my place, and it's all I want is them to read well. All right. Okay, so this is the reading I have to do for next Sunday. I've got the first reading for the Novus Ordo Feast of Christ the King, which this year is Daniel 7, 13 through 14. So look, how do you do this? How do you prepare to act as lector? So first thing, and I'm pretty sure, listen, I don't know the hearts of all these people, but, and I don't ask everybody, but I'm pretty sure the following step, which is extremely crucial for any kind of public reading that's serious and communicative, I'm pretty sure this step is never taken. What is this step? First thing you do before you give a public reading is you privately read the thing aloud at least once or twice. Okay? Like, I feel like in my heart of hearts, as somebody who's read a lot of stuff, that ought to be common sense, but I'm about 90% sure that almost all lectors just show up on the day and they know what their assignment is, and they go up to the ambo and they read whatever's on the page the first time they've ever seen it. I don't know that that's I don't have survey data, but the results lead me to believe that's what happens. And if you've acted as lector and that's what you've done, that's wrong. Stop doing it. And if you know that the people at your parish do that and you are any kind of friends with them, tell them to stop doing that, because it is a, and I know it's usually in good faith. I know we're not talking about people who are malicious, but it is a terrible disservice to the word. So please stop doing it. All right. So this is how you do it. Okay. Look, it's not very hard. So you get your reading. I pulled this out of Universalis, but you can get it out of the lectionary. You can get it out of, off the USCCB website, wherever you get it. You go to get it, and you just sit down. You come to your computer, you get your book out, whatever. You open it up, you just go look. You just start, and we'll just give an initial reading. This is not a reading for presentation. Just go. I gazed into the visions at
I gazed into the visions of the night, and I saw coming on the clouds of heaven one like a son of man. He came to the one of great age, and he was led into his presence. On him was conferred sovereignty, glory, and kingship, and all of the peoples, nations, and languages became his servants. His sovereignty is an eternal sovereignty which shall never pass away, nor will his empire ever be destroyed. All right, that's just a first self-familiarization read. Like if you've never even seen the words, you never said them before. Okay. Okay. You say it says, well, the traditional missal requires the priest to read through the entire mass before he celebrates it. Yeah, but I serve the Latin mass too, and that doesn't happen. And I mean, they read through it in the sense that they open the page and look at it, but they don't sit up. That maybe that's not what happens. I promise. This is a problem. But it's correct to say that the lectors shouldn't be any different. Yeah. Well, in terms of norms, they should also read through it. In terms of what happens, that's not what happens. They don't do it. It's a problem. Okay. So we did our first blah, blah, blah. So let's assume you're lector, okay? And if you're not, we're going to talk about that. But let's assume you're lector. Now, we did our first crappy reading. We didn't do a good job, but we're not trying to do a good job. We're trying to say all the words. So what happened? So for instance, I had no enunciation. I was not particularly prepared, so I didn't know what was going to happen. I'm used to this line being the Ancient of Days in better translations than the NAB. So we have to be prepared for the stuff we don't know. So he came to the one of great age and was led into his presence. So you need to think about that. I think I stumbled on conferred. So on him was conferred sovereignty. Okay, so the usual thing that you do after the first one is, and you can do this a lot of ways, but I usually go over the second reading and I start thinking about what I'm saying. So I gazed into the visions of the night. So what I usually do is I start to think about the words in terms, so pronoun, verb, noun, noun. So your emphasis, if you're not always, but a lot of times, all the weight of emphasis and sound is going to sit either on the verbs or the nouns, and sometimes the pronouns, although it's a little cheeky to be like, I. Pronouns in spoken word don't hold a lot of weight. The fact that you're using a pronoun is already indicating that it's not supposed to hold a lot of weight, but you can do it for certain reasons. It's a choice. I don't think there's any case here where a pronoun ought to hold a lot of weight, at least as indicated by the text, but we can. It's very rare that a pronoun like I or he or she or it ought to hold a lot of weight, or his, for instance. But sometimes his possessive pronouns are a little more common, because sometimes you'll run into a possessive pronoun that's indicating a distinction from something else, and so you want it to hold a little weight. But most of the time, pronouns don't hold weight, and so you shouldn't give them any weight in speaking. But what will hold some kind of weight is usually the verbs and the nouns. And then you can think about adverbs and adjectives and conjunctions. But the first thing you need to start working on is, when you read aloud, verbs and nouns. So for your second reading, after you've done your first crappy reading where you don't know what you're doing, start thinking about where the verbs and the nouns are. All right, so let's go back to it. Say it again. Gazed, verb. Oop. Screwing things up. Gazed, verb. Visions, noun. Night, noun. I, pronoun. But we're not going to think too hard about pronouns right now. I gazed into the visions of the night, and I saw, verb, coming, verb, on the clouds of heaven, clouds, heaven, nouns. One, kind of a pronoun, indexical, really. One like a son of man. He came to the one of great age. I think the weight is on one, and then these are. You could. It depends. You come to think of great. I hate this. The NAB this is a problem. The New American Bible is a problem. So the Ancient of Days is beautiful. To the one of great age is terrible. It should never be done, but it's what I have, so I have to work with what I have. Because what's the problem? One is the weight, and then of great age is some kind of adjectival phrase, which is awful. So, and then I have to find the noun in it, which is age. He came to the one of great age. It's not great, but you can work with it. And was led into his presence. Led presence. On him was conferred sovereignty, glory, and kingship. So you want to note these things that are lists. You have to work with, so this is a mental thing I do, but so this out was broken up on the app I got, and it's probably close to what it's going to be on the page. Also, by the way, you need to get, if you're lector, you need to get to Mass at least half an hour or an hour before, and you want to go up to the lectionary and you want to see how it's printed on the page. And if you can have a lectionary, I happen to have a study lectionary, but they're not easy to get. If you have a lectionary, it's a good idea to see what it's going to be on the printed page, because this is just a principle of practicing anything. If you practice anything, it needs to be as close as possible to the actual circumstance. So ideal practice on being a lector, come about a week before, go up to the ambo with the lectionary, open it to where you're going to read a week later, and practice it out loud with nobody there, because you want the whole environment, you want the whole book, you want everything as close as possible. But if you can't do that, try to get his formatting as close to possible so you don't screw it up. Now, in a digital environment, I have to think about, I can change the text to help me, but you have to remember that it's not going to be the same on the day. So what I'm talking about is we've got a list here. Lists are important. On him was conferred what? Sovereignty, glory, and kinship. Sovereignty, comma, glory, and kinship. This is a New American Version problem. Who would do this? Sovereignty, comma, glory and kinship, comma, and men of all peoples. Awful. Don't translate like this. Okay. Into English. Terrible. So what I would do with something with a list, because a list is a unit, I would begin to rearrange it. Okay. Treat it like a broken one. Let me change this. Okay. I'm sorry, I have to change the font size to keep it on one line, but this is how you do it. Okay, so, why did I do this? On him was conferred what? Sovereignty, glory, and kinship, and men of all peoples. Conferred modifies a whole list, and you want to treat this list as a unit. See that? So when you're reading, it's not going to be, you don't want it to be sovereignty, glory, and kinship, and men of all peoples. That's not how it works. It's apples, oranges, and pears is how a list works. Apples, oranges, and pears It's a unit, not apples, oranges, and pears. That's not. They form a verbal unit. So on him was conferred what? This unit: sovereignty, glory, and kingship, and men of all peoples. Now look, I can't fix the text. So this is just terrible translation. You do not do this in English. So this is an American Bible problem. Sovereignty, glory, and kingship. That's not how you do a list. You don't do glory and kingship. You don't do a verbal list this way. Sovereignty, you don't have why? You don't have and in a list in English. Sovereignty, glory, and kingship, and men of all peoples. But it's what I've been given, and I have to take it. So on him was conferred sovereignty, glory, and kingship, and men of all peoples. See what I'm saying? Terrible. I hate the NAV. Terrible. Nations and languages became his servants. Nations, languages became servants. Well, technically his servants, but his sovereignty is an eternal sovereignty. So this is a case where we'll talk about it, but it's an adjective. So sometimes you want to put emphasis on an adjective. His sovereignty is an eternal sovereignty. Sometimes you want to put it on his too, which is we'll make choices. We're not on that round. Which shall never pass away, nor will his empire ever be destroyed. Yeah, so yeah, Jakers is sharing my pain. The new line for glory and kingship strikes me as a bit odd. Is that present? Yeah, that's what I got. Let me look. So let me make sure that hold on. Let me get USCCB daily. I am certain that this is what's going to happen. Let me make sure, because sometimes I'm wrong. What is this Sunday this week? Because I got this out of Universalis, but Universalis has the New American Bible in it for Americans. Okay, so Sunday is the 24th. Let's go see what it is. Nope. Oh, well, it helped a little bit. Okay. All right, I'm pulling from the USCCB. Okay. I'll put it on the page. So the USCCB website helped a very tiny amount. Hold on, how did I do that? I did this wrong. Page route format. Okay. All right. So this is the USCCB is usually very slavish to the lectionary format. The Universalis is not necessarily. 13. Okay. So the only thing that the USCCB gave me is a comma after glory, but then it still has this is garbage. Okay. The ancient one. Oh no. All right. This is very bad. So the USCCB is very likely to be right, and Universalis is wrong. We're doomed now. This is bad. Let me go get the study lectionary I've got on my bookshelf. 1 second. This is very bad. This almost never happens. Universalis does not fail me like this. This is very bad. Oh. All right, let's see what happened. Let's see which of these is correct. If neither of them correct, I'm gonna go to bed. That's what's gonna happen. So there's a study missile, but to get a study lectionary for Mass, you have to get this weird. You get who knows who. Liturgy Training Publications made. What is this book? This book is, what is this press? Who knows who this is? So you can get easy a study missile, but getting a study lectionary requires you to go to God knows who this is. Okay, so let's see. Solemnities and feasts. Christ the King is what we need. Let's see. Okay, it's either 413. Let me look. Yep. Okay. What is this then? Well, I'm glad you caught me. It is, as the visions during the night continued, I saw. So what is this version? Whatever this is god awful. What is this? What version is this? I don't know what this is. This version appears only in Universalis and a couple of other things. Terrible. Okay, well, good. Yeet. Good, you saved me some time. This is why you always check the books. All right. So what's the actual text? As the visions during the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. When he reached the Ancient One, now it's still not Ancient of Days, but it's better, and was presented before him, the one like a son of man received dominion, glory, and kingship. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. His kingship shall not be destroyed. Yeah, you're right. I don't know what happened. This is some obscure. I don't know. The only thing I saw it for was Universalis, and then an Australian diocese and an Irish diocese. So I don't know what that is. I don't know. Yeah, but anyway, whatever. We don't have to deal with that. It was terrible. Good, so it's gone. That's what we're actually going to deal with. Okay. Same thing though. As the visions during the night continued, I saw. So, okay, so this happens. This is another thing to think about. The units on the page are not necessarily the units of oral reading. So, same issue. As the visions of the night continued, comma. So it can help you. Let's watch this. I saw one like a son of man coming, comma, on the clouds of heaven. All right. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, you can make that one line. This is for the sake of reading. The one like a son of man received dominion, glory, and kingship. Thank God, that's much better. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. So again, there doesn't need to be a line break here for the sake of reading. It might make sense in Hebrew, but it doesn't make sense in English. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away, comma, his kingship shall not be destroyed. And we just do this mentally. It prepares us. You need eventually to do it on the page, but doing it on the page is, that's again, you need to sit down with physical material. But anyway, so we've done a preparatory reformatting digitally. If you don't have the ability to do it digitally, so if you're just doing it out of the lectionary, you go up there and you start to make decisions. There's two. I like doing it visually like this digitally, but you don't need to do that. You can just do it virtually by making mental choices. Okay. Back to what we were doing. And see, let's make decisions. So some things I start to do around my third reading are I distinguish nouns and verbs. So as the visions during the night continued, verb. So bold, italics. I saw, italics. One, technically a pronoun, but you might want to put emphasis. One is an interesting pronoun. Like so this is a noun phrase, son of man. So you don't do, when you run into something like this, you take it as a noun phrase. You don't go one, because of how it's constructed, because it's constructed out of, so for instance, like something like a bold son would be an adjective and a noun. But when you've got something like son of man, technically the noun is son, and then of man is a kind of adjectival modification. But realistically, I mean, it's a man's son. It's complicated, actually, but it should be treated as a unit. So, son of man, not son of man, or not son of man, son of man, son of man is the unit. Coming, verb. On the clouds of heaven. Also, when it turns out, this is further modification. There's no verb in this line. And when there's no verb in a line, that gives a good indication that it ought to belong to another line as a verbal unit. Because you don't just have clouds heaven hanging out there. They're always being connected together with verbs. So if you've got a line, if something's been screwed up on the page in such a way that it indicates you should read it with no verbs, that's not right. When he reached the Ancient One, and was presented before him. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, him might carry weight here. So we need to think about it. So as opposed to one, you could do when he reached, but it's a little weird. When he reached is probably going to carry weight. He is not, most likely. That's something you have to know from experience. And so I wouldn't bold it. This is again the pronoun problem. But sometimes you'll have a case where and was presented before him. Him probably will have some weight at the end of the line, because you don't want it to be, because think about it here. When he reached, he is Barrett. When he reached, but was presented before him. It's not going to be the same as he reached. What would happen? Was presented before him. It's going to mumble off on the end, and you don't really want that. The one like a son of man, again, unit. And also, this is another thing. So when I have repetition like this on things that have accent, I usually underline because they usually have weight. They usually have special weight. So one thing you can do when you see stuff like this is, I saw one like a son of man. And then when you come to it again, the one like a son of man. So, I mean, you could do it different ways, but sometimes you want the tone on these to be the same because lots of times whatever significance here is carried over to here. Okay. Then received. Dominion, glory, and kingship. Much better list than the other version. Much better list. All peoples, nations, and languages. Language is a little odd. A little odd in English. Serve him. Serve him. That's a discretionary case if you want him to have weight. I'm going to bold it so we can think about it. His dominion, his doesn't have a lot of weight. It's dominion that does. Is an everlasting dominion. I want to have you think about. No, how do I want to? This is a case where I want you to think about everlasting because it sometimes non-verbs and nouns have certain weight. That shall not be taken away. This is a verbal phrase. Technically, the verb is taken, but it's taken away is the verb. Orally, taken away is the whole thing. And you might want to think about not as a special word. I'll tell you why in a minute. His kingship shall not be destroyed. Destroyed. Okay. Yeah, thank you. Nominative with an attached genitive. I'm going to avoid using grammatical terms because I want you to think about this orally, and we don't think that way orally, but yes. Okay. Now look, because this is sort of voice acting stuff, and so what you're trying to think about primarily is how stuff's going to sound, and there's not a grammatical rule for that. There's a set of felt oral rules. And I'm not the most advanced reader in the world, but you need to start to feel this out. Okay, so look at this work we've done. Also, son of man, son of man. So remember that connection. This is not a very strong. Some are very strong. They'll have a phrase 3 or 4 or 5 times. If you've got a phrase 3 or 4 or 5 times, that's a big deal. So this one really only has son of man. Although I would suggest you might want to bridge son of man. The two big figures of this are son of man and the ancient one, the ancient of days. So you'll want to think about, I saw one like a son of man when he reached the ancient one, the one like a son of man. You might want to somehow subtly indicate the connection between these. This is prefiguration of the Trinity on these. Father, Son, etc. But anyway, okay. So we'd be on our 3rd reading now. As the visions during the night continued. I don't like that first line. It's a hanging line is an issue. As the visions during the night continued. So you got to make decisions. So this happens a lot at the beginning of readings, especially Old Testament readings. Old Testament readings have this problem a lot. Usually the beginning and sometimes the end will be not a great starter orally. So you need to think about how you're going to deliver it. And you might work on this throughout the week. As the visions during the night continued, that's not good. As the visions during the night continued, I saw, that's okay. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. And you can give slight differences. So I saw one. You can give slight verbal differences between verbs and nouns. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. You got to make decisions about the commas too. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. So some commas are short. You don't want, so this, as the visions during the night continued, and there can be a half-second pause, that one's okay. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. You don't want as long a pause here. You don't want to be, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. That's not right. All right. So remember, there's different kinds of commas. And in this case, I've indicated it by the line break, but it won't necessarily be like that on the page. So if you treated every comma the same, it would end up being, as the visions during the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the cloud. As the visions of the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. No. As the visions of the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. There's slight pause. So remember that. Okay. And I've indicated it by being on the same line. A semicolon usually indicates a big separation, usually bigger than a comma. Okay. I saw one on the clouds of heaven. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. When he reached, okay, so that's fine. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. So breath, usually. As the visions during the night continued, maybe half breath, maybe no breath, I saw one like a son of man coming, no breath, but maybe a slight distinction. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. I would treat this as coming on what? On the clouds of heaven. So it's basically a pause for you to indicate the manner in which he's coming. It's not a breath pause. It's not a meditative pause. I saw one like a man coming, and he's coming in a special way, and it's on the clouds of heaven. That's what the point is. So I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds. I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. See what I'm saying? Pause. So breath. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him. Okay. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, the one like a son of man received. I'm not sure how I want to do that. The one like a son of man received dominion, glory, and kingship. Paul, big breath. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. So that's a decision. So you could give the same tone for dominion, glory, and kingship to peoples, nations, and languages. You can make a choice. So you could treat it like this. So how we're doing Son of Man, Ancient One, connecting in some way. You can do received dominion, glory, and kingship. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. That's a choice. I don't know if it's good or not, but consider it. Did I? No, I didn't bleach the front tips of my hair. Hold on. Somebody wants to ask. 1 second. What are you looking at? No, just the lighting. Just the lighting. Let's see. Oh, somebody, Jekers has added. Is it permissible to add in Diebus Ilis in those days, as is done traditionally? I never thought about that for the Old Testament reading because it's not usual. You could. I don't think it's not permitted. But wait, in illo tempore, isn't that for the gospel only? I don't think you can add it for the, it would have to be something for the prophecy, but that's not usual. For the epistle, it would be brethren or brothers and sisters, even if that's not how the line starts. But I don't know, for an Old Testament reading, is it in those days? Oh, Diebus, I'm sorry, I'm not paying attention. At that time is English. Let me see. Well, first of all, let's see if it would help. In those days, as the vision, I don't even really think that helps, to be honest. It didn't help that much in this case. Whether you could add it, I don't know. I've done it with the epistle before, to be honest. I know it is still written in the lectionary explicitly for gospel in the Latin. Well, look at it. If it's in the Latin, things that are there, it's a gray area because customs can still continue. It's a gray area. This is going to be those things like how we hold ourselves during Mass and how we place our hands in the lectionary and things like that. It's going to be in that area. I don't think it's impermissible. I don't think it adds anything substantive. I think it's equivalent to it's equivalent to something like a reading from the letter of, so it might say a reading from Hebrews or a reading from First Colossians, but you could say a reading from the first letter of St. Paul to the Colossians. I think it's about equivalent to that in terms of what you're doing. But you'd have to make a measured choice on that. I don't think that's a case where I don't think would be a problem. Okay. Let's see. His dominion. Okay. Yeah. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. So this is a case where an adjective holds some weight because you don't want it to be. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. Weird. And also repetitive and weird. His dominion is an everlasting dominion. It's also kind of a verb orally. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. So on not, this is an oral thing. You need to make a distinction. And it depends on, this is actually going to be in terms of the dialect and accent of the region. So I'm Southeastern, and my sensibility is that you need to emphasize not, because it is very easy for you to lose the negative. So for me, it's his dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. What you don't want to do is that shall not be taken away, because it's very easy, at least in my dialect of English, to hear to lose. And so it would be his dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. And you can hear shall be taken away because not is lost in the sentence. So that's a feel thing. And also here, his kingship shall not be destroyed. Also, there's repetition. So it's not only a kind of event, but it's also repetition. You need to look for that. If you've got two lines where there's obvious repetition. But so it's both repetition and dialect that leads me to say you want to put some emphasis on not. You don't usually do that with helping words, but there are certain cases. And sometimes with is. Most commonly, I would say with negatives, is, and sometimes, but sometimes. It depends. If the weight of the sentence calls for but, if, or and to have special place, then you emphasize it. So usually if it's a list, if the last thing is special, or if the thing after and is special, you go and blah 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 blah. But usually helper words, be, it, is, and, will be, but, or, those don't get emphasis. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. So that's a little, get that trippingly on the tongue. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. His kingship shall not be destroyed. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay. So that's how you begin to construct this. Okay. The Latin still has the full lectio epistibiati poly apostoli ad. The problem is that the translation is the USCCB or whatever norm. I don't like adding things, but we can make some decisions. I would just say careful. And in this case, I don't find it helpful. But if it's something that's in the anterior text, so there's hierarchies of texts here, and the normative Latin text is the superior text. We can consider it in certain cases, but I will say in this case, it's not going to help. In those days, as the visions during the night continued, it's not that much. Still a weird hanging phrase. Not that helpful. Some cases it might be helpful. Okay. So let's go through one more time and get the whole thing, because we're on nearly 2 hours, and I'm sure I've bored I didn't get a lot of YouTube audience. I'm sure I bored them to death. As the visions during the night continued, I saw one like a son of man coming on the clouds of heaven. When he reached the Ancient One and was presented before him, the one like a son of man received dominion, glory, and kingship. All peoples, nations, and languages serve him. His dominion is an everlasting dominion that shall not be taken away. His kingship shall not be destroyed. The word of the Lord. Now, do you see? Look, this is my first go through on this. I'll probably modify it some more by Sunday. Do you see how superior that is to, the ordinary? That took, we took a little while, but that really takes about 30 minutes of prep. Do you see how superior that is to the ordinary go up there, blah, 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 blah. Kitty can't get blocking my thing. Okay. So let's see. Now, after you've come to a way you want to read it, you should probably do it a few more times. I'm not going to make the chat suffer through that. You should probably do it a few more times on the day. And then the day that you've come to how you decided you want to sort of do it later in the day. You come back and you do it a couple more times in private or in public. Then throughout the week, so it's Wednesday, this is going to be Sunday. Throughout the week, you want to come back to it once a day or once every other day until the time. You see what I'm saying? Because you want to have this in your head. And then on the Sunday when you read it, you ought to, this is not always possible, you ought to go up to the lectionary when nobody's there, when almost nobody is there, and look at it before Mass, how it's going to be on the page, and at least silently mouth to yourself what you're going to say while you're looking at the page a couple of times. And then when you go up there, then you want to do it as you've been practicing it or with some modifications. You understand? That's how you want to do it. Now, I mean, again, that's not everything you can do. Other things you can do is, look, when you're practicing it, ideally, if you had a functional program, and this is a problem, if you had a functional program, you would have a time, maybe on Wednesday or whatever, where you recited your reading in front of people who could hear you, and they would give you criticism, especially for the Sunday reading. But I don't know any parish that does that much work. But ideally, at least at some point, you would receive critical feedback from people on what you're doing, and you would do the recitation in the context of the sanctuary at the ambo with the text as it's going to be in the printed volume that it's in, because you want to have that practice as close to possible in the form it's going to be on the day. Now, that's not, we can't always accomplish that, but it's ideal to do it that way because the brain gets very confused if you're going from I did it at my desk to I did it in the place. If you're a veteran, it's fine, but if you're not very good, it's a problem. But ideally, you would do what I just did, but you would do it up at the ambo on a Wednesday or whatever, and then you would work through it through the rest of the week, and then you would renew it on the Sunday before, maybe an hour before, and then you would deliver it at the time. But we can't always do that, and you would have some feedback at some point, but we can't always do that. But that's the structure of how to set these things up. Remember, what you don't do is you don't go up there on the day you've never looked at it and you just blah, blah, blah. Some other things I didn't talk about because we didn't have time. Well, we could have had time, but I yapped too much. And this is something you do throughout the week as well. So you might want to, let me structure your weeks if you've been assigned on Sunday. The first thing you want to do on Monday is you want to look up the Monday before, is you want to look up the reading you're going to have. And then you want to look up commentary on it. So you want to know what these things are about. So you want to comprehend this, and you want to comprehend its meaning, and you want to comprehend its scriptural position and all that. And you also want to a certain extent, comprehend its relation to the other readings. I haven't done that here, and I doubt it would change my decisions all that much. But sometimes, especially with the Old Testament readings, it will change your decision on how to emphasize this and that. Because you might have a word that foreshadows the Trinity in the gospel, or foreshadows some lesson of Christ that's going to be in the gospel, or foreshadows something that's going to be in the epistle that Paul's talking about. And you want that word to have weight for later. So those are decisions you want to make. And you also want to make sure you understand what it's talking about. I'm sufficiently familiar to know some things about this verse, but if you read the Old Testament especially, and you look at it, I don't know what he's talking about. You need to go to the research and know what it is. Why? Because that unsurety will color your reading. You can't just do this formally like an AI and just make sure to emphasize the right grammar and hope it comes out. You need to, for the sake of faith, You know, you need to have a feeling about what dominion and glory and kingship and peoples, nations, and languages are, and it'll make it more organic. Now, if you're practiced, you can get away with not doing that, but that's not how you want to do it. You want to know about Daniel and his visions. You want to know about the Son of Man. You want to know about the Ancient One, and you want to know what these things are to a certain extent before you read, in order that the reading be organic. So that's very important. So I'd say on Monday, you do that and you begin to do what I was doing, chopping it up and thinking about it. Then by Wednesday, you need to do this detailed work where you put it out and you decide to a certain extent how you're going to read it. And then by Sunday, it needs to be ready to go, and you need to be able to prepare up at the AMBO an hour or so before you do it. That's what I'm trying to say. Yeah. Deus Prim says, don't first time it. Yeah, you say that like that's funny, but this is what the majority of lectors do it. He says, I don't think people are going to practice for Monday. I am making it more than it, you know, I am making more, but like, look, I'm telling you what the norm should look like. If you want to do it all on Wednesday and then you look at it again on Friday and then you do it on Sunday, okay. I'm just telling you, as a matter of human psychology, if you've got an important reading on Sunday, you ought to begin to prepare earlier in the week. And I would say that the structure, because of how memory works and how training works, the structure really ought to be something like Monday, Wednesday, maybe a refresher in the middle there on Friday, and then Sunday to actually prepare properly. Then you can decrease by degrees according to your schedule. But you definitely don't want to have it ready to go on Sunday, because that's what a lot of people, in fact, I'm going to say almost all people do. And it's terrible. If you want to just do Wednesday, I would say bare minimum is something like Wednesday, Sunday. You know, Saturday, Sunday is pretty bad for you. Yeah, I know. So you say the norm here is like 10 minutes before Saturday Holy Mass, Sundays. I don't know. That's terrible. Like, if that's really the worst way to possibly do it. And I don't know if you were here at the beginning, but that's why you have all of these, that's why all of these liturgies of the word are very bad and terrible to listen to, because part of it, there's no preparation. It's just not read to be heard. And if you want to read something to be heard, it has to be done with preparation. There's no way to get around it. There's no actor that does it without preparation. There's nobody that does it without preparation except us. And if you do verbal recitation of a text without preparation, it comes out as garbage. It comes out blah, 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 and people can't listen to it. And the thing is formatted to be heard, and it's inappropriate. You can get away with it. Look, and we found this consistently when we were. Yeah, I know. So this is what he says. His Prima says, the thing is, we barely have people willing to volunteer for reading, so we end up picking people kind of last moment. Yep. So there's two sides to this coin. There's the personal side. So at my parish, we have people who are regular. And so a lot of this is inexcusable altogether. Okay, we have the same set of people. I had to fight to get in the list. They're fixed. They don't like to be disrupted. They're set in their ways. They've been doing it, etc. We have set people, especially on Sundays, but also during the weekday, who are doing it all the time. When you're at that stage, then certainly the things I'm saying should come into play. The other side is the institutional side. So look, I mean, if you are at a parish and you can't get people to regularly read, that needs to be fixed. That's every bit as much a problem as you can't get a regular priest. You see what I'm saying? The liturgy of the word is 1/2 to 1/3 of the Mass, depending on the where the mass is conducted. And if you can't get readers who are ready to go and know what they're doing, that's every bit as bad as you can't get a priest, or that's every bit as bad as you can't get pews or something. You see what I'm saying? Now, if things being bad is because of some special circumstance, I understand. You know, you just can't get regulars. Everybody's in and out every week, or you know, it's new people all the time, some kind of military situation or something like that. Yeah, okay. We have to pull people out of the audience. But if you have regulars every week, there's not really an excuse for not being able to train up lectors. At least one. And if he's not, you know, I mean, do you not have, you got to tell me, look, you be honest with me and you tell me one way or another, maybe it's not the case. Have you talked about, okay. They ask, have you talked about whether it's suitable for elderly people to read? Okay. I'll talk about problems, habitual problems. It's pretty habitual for elderly to be reading, and it's pretty habitual for women to be reading. And what I'm going to say is that it's not inappropriate or impossible for elderly to read. And it's not necessarily, I also talked about sometimes young people, so under 18. So the three cardinal things I see happen a lot. They'll get an old person to do it. They'll get a woman to do it. And they'll get like a kid to do it. Right. And by a woman, I don't just mean it will be a woman. I mean, it's that thing where the only people who want to volunteer, it's like the people who want to volunteer to cook, or the people who want to volunteer to do the schedule. You know, it's usually some woman who likes to take care of little tasks, is what I mean when it's some woman. That is to say, the kind of lady that volunteers to take care of stuff. It's usually a woman. She's great, and I love to have her, and I'm glad that she's doing the calendars, and I'm glad that she put glitter on the whatever. But, you know, is she reading worth a damn? Or elderly people are there, then they're there all the time, so they're reading because they're there all the time. Or kids are there, and then I don't know why they have them read. I don't know, to like what, teach them a lesson, or like to like, because it's, I don't know. The kids are the worst one. I don't understand why they're up there. But okay. So with elderly people, I would just run them through the same sort of stuff I'm saying. And then we would see. So look, I mean, most elderly people have a certain sense of their own dignity. And most elderly people don't want to do tasks where they're going to be limping around and it makes them look bad. Or, you know, if they have problems eating and, you know, stuff falls out of their mouth, they don't want to be eating in public. Like, most elderly people have a sense of their own dignity. And look, you just get the elderly people and they want to be lectors or whatever, and you see if they can do it. And, you know, if you got a guy and he's James Earl Jones, you know, if he's James Earl Jones and he's 80 years old, but he reads like he's Darth Vader, he can read the liturgy. But if it's Edna and she's like, and then the Hebrews came out and did talk to the Lord, if that's what's happening, Edna ought to know that she can't do it. And there's two ways to do that. Either you go up to her, look, Edna, you can't. Nobody can hear you. You don't need to be the lector. You're bad at it. I'm sorry. That's the rude way. Or the nice way is, look, you need to work on having a program in the parish which treats this ministry seriously. And when you have a program in the parish that treats this ministry seriously and tells people that they need to read clearly so that other people who can hear, and that have workshops, feedback, training, anything, basic stuff. Look, if you've got altar server training, then you ought to have lector training. If you don't have altar server training, what are you doing? If you have altar servers and they don't know what they're doing, what are you doing? You see what I'm saying? So if you can at least get to the stage where you have altar server training, you should have lector training. And if you have lector training, you're going to tell them they need to read clearly. And then you ought to have somebody go up to the ambo and you have them read a text. And if they read the text and it comes out as, I'm going to go, I didn't hear you. And if you've got somebody go up there and you have them read the text to practice, and they have 5 other people in the room who want to be lectors, it's simple as pie to say, look, read out the 10 commandments or whatever, read out something from Leviticus or whatever the reading you want to pick to test them. You have them sit up there and you go, read it out. And they'll go, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and the world was without form and void. And then you go, and you give them, okay, thank you. And you have them stand up there and you turn to the audience. You go, what did he say? And if the audience says, I don't know, it's over. He didn't have the skill to convey it. And if he has any sense of dignity, he'll go, yeah, I didn't. And then he can either correct himself or he can't. And if he can't correct himself after 3 or 4 or 5 times, or at least after 3 training sessions, he's done. He's done. That's a big deal. It's the same thing with anything. If you've got a thurifer who can't swing the thurible around without hitting stuff certainly after 3 or 4 times where he was embarrassed from it, he doesn't need to be thurifer anymore. If you have a crossbearer who drops the cross every time he goes up there, he doesn't need to be crossbearer anymore. If you've got a reader who goes up there and can't talk in a way that people can hear, he doesn't need to be reader anymore. Period. And people don't want to hear that, because these ministries get handed out like merit badges for the elderly, but it doesn't work. You have to at some point say, look, this is so that everybody can hear the reading. If you can't read, you can't be up there. And that's just can read clearly so we can hear you level. That's not even with all the other stuff I told you to do where you prep. Like step 1 is you go up and look, we went through some videos earlier. I don't know if you were here, but we went some videos earlier and we had one where it was an instituted, or at least it looked like a guy. He was in a cassock and a surplice. So he's either an instituted lector or he does it regularly enough that they have him in cassock and surplice. And he came out, and then we went to the He's mumbling, and he's a trained guy. That's every bit as bad as you drop the candle when you're up there as a candle holder. That's every bit as bad as you hit the thurible against the floor or the pew or the rail. You're just not done. And so if you can't speak clearly after 4 or 5 times being corrected on it, you're done. So if that's because you're elderly, it's time to retire. But most elderly people know that, and they'll either fix it or they can't, and they'll admit it. And if not, they need to be conducted away gently. If he just had a stroke, if he just had a stroke and he can't talk, he doesn't need to be up there. It's not doing him any favors. But most elderly people know that. If it's a woman, so with a woman, I don't mean that she's female. I mean that she just volunteers for everything. Some of these people who volunteer for everything don't have the skills to do what they're talking about. And if you're the kind of person who volunteers for everything, where you can, fix it and fiddle with it until it's right and organized, that might be fine for the potluck or for the newsletter or for the bulletin or whatever it is you've got her doing. But it's not necessarily fine for reading, which is a performance skill. So if you've got some lady up there that volunteers for every old thing and she doesn't have performance skills, she doesn't need to do it. And if you correct her 3 or 4 or 5 times, certainly over 3 or 4 or 5 sessions, and she's not improving, she doesn't need to be up there. And it's the same thing with children. The problem with children is they don't know what they sound like, and they don't know how to talk to people. So children certainly almost never should be up there. I don't care if it's a mass for children. They shouldn't be up there to read. They can't do it. Or they need to be high IQ children, but that's going to be, 2% or less of all children. So they're not going to be there. You'll know. If somebody comes out and they can be a child actor, then maybe they can read. Otherwise, they shouldn't be up there, period. In fact, I really don't think anybody under 18 should be reading, because it's more likely after about 13 or 14, you might get 5 out of 100 but for the most part, that's not what happens. And the best case you get is some gal coming up there who reads like she's the valedictorian, and she sounds like crap and shouldn't be up there. For the most part, somebody under 18 should not be there because they just don't have the experience. They don't know what they sound like. They don't know what people who can't read sound like. They don't know how they should fix it to sound better, and they don't have the experience doing it sufficiently to fix it. 95 times out of 100. So I would just say, look, if you got 10-year-olds or even 15-year-olds, they don't need to be up there. I don't care what the occasion is. As for if women who are competent can do it, the church allows it. So I would just put them through the general struggle I'm telling you. Let's see what else. Somebody says, how many parishes with altar server training have service that actually know what they're doing? Lol. If you mean like as in all regimented down to everything, not necessarily a lot. But if you mean can do the task serviceably or even well, a majority, that if they're actually showing up to the training, get there. Okay to good. Okay to good. I'm just talking about get there okay to good. You went through the videos with me. It's not okay to good. It's bad to okay. That's not where Lector should be, and that's not where that's not the range that altar server should be at. But with altar server, it has natural corrections. If you're so incompetent at altar server that you can't do anything, you're going to either stop doing it or fix it, because you're going to forget to give Father this, or you're going to forget to be over here at this certain time, or you're going to drop something, you're going to hit something, or you're going to embarrass yourself. With Lector, for whatever reason, even though it's a performance art and even though nobody can hear you, we just give everybody a pass. That's not acceptable. Oh, you see, my home parish has altar server training, and all the clergymen are constantly turn their backs to the tabernacle wood, crossing it to bow to wood. Look, this is a problem of current liturgical architecture. The demand about the demand about how to face the tradition about how to face the tabernacle and is conflicting with the new placement of the altar. And so you have to be forgiving on that. That's not what we're talking about. That's not that level of precision. When the altar and the tabernacle were one unit, the relevant liturgical respects could be paid to them as one unit. When they are separate units, the liturgical space is divided in a certain way. And so the tabernacle can be acknowledged during the course of the Mass, and usually is at the beginning when everybody comes to the front. But you can't think about it like you could when they were all one unit. It's just divided the space. Well, so the rubricical norm on that the lector should be vested and sit in the sanctuary, it's different. There's conflicting texts on this. But I mean, it is better in certain ways if they're vested. Let's see. And he says, if it's due to people not hearing you, can't you just increase the mic speaker? Okay. This is a good question. There's two manners of not hearing you. So some manner of not hearing you is you're not loud enough. If you are not loud but clear. So I'll go to, if you are not loud but clear. That's how you see, if you are not loud but clear. If you are not loud but clear. That's just volume. And in theory, the microphone can fix it. Although I would say, I mean, if you've got two readers up there and the third one can't be heard without an adjustment to the microphone, the third one needs to speak up. Okay. Now, if it's nobody can hear anybody except maybe one, if it's 2 out of 3 you can't hear him, and the third one you can because he's loud. Okay, then the microphone needs to be adjusted. But if it's one person is faint because they don't speak up, I mean they're public speakers. They need to know how to project. So on volume alone, I would say sometimes it's microphone, but a lot of times it's somebody needs to speak up. So in that case, it can be a certain kind of negotiation. But I would say the general expectation, if the sound system is working and can convey, and you ask yourself, does the sound system habitually convey the liturgy of the word most of the time for a lot of people? If you say yes, that the priest can usually deliver, or the priest and deacon can usually deliver the gospel, and a good reader can usually deliver the reading, but then somebody is faint, that person needs to speak up. And if they can't speak up, unless there is good reason, it should not be handled with the microphone. They should be made to speak up. Period. Because that's part of the performance skill. So if you can't adjust the volume of your voice, you don't have the performance skill and should not be reading. I'm sorry. I know people don't want to, I know people don't want to hear that, but it's see what I'm saying? But a lot of times it's not about volume. A lot of times the reason people can't hear you is they some oral quality, they have some problem. They mumble. The two most common things I've come with are bad reading quality, so mumbling, or bad mumbling, fast talking. We saw that in one of our readings we looked at. Mumbling, fast talking, bad enunciation. So the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. All right. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. The quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. Or accents. Accents is also a problem. Especially if you've got somebody, this happens a lot. If you've got one Hispanic coming to a predominantly English mass and they let them up there to read, and they've got heavy Hispanic accent, it doesn't work. So it would be like if I came to a New York mass and I started saying things like, the quick brown fox jumped over the lazy dog. That might work in some rural part of Arkansas, but it is not going to work in New York. Okay. Tristan wants to ask, if by chanting the readings one of the lectors makes the scripture unintelligible, would it be safe to say he's not performing it correctly? Yeah, especially if it's in vernacular. Although I would say, look, I mean, this happened in Latin too. The chants in Latin are meant to be heard, and were traditionally meant to be heard. And if you've got an audience that can hear Latin and his Latin is terrible, he's also screwed it up. I'm sorry. For the most part, Latin listeners don't actually know any Latin. And so you could say, in illo tempore, or you could say, in illo tempore. You could do in illo tempore. You could do it however you want. And they won't care. They don't know the difference. What's the difference between Dixie Jesus, between Dixie Jesus, Dixie Jesus, Dixie Jesus? They don't know. So you could do whatever you want. But if you actually have an audience that is meant to hear it, then it needs to be proper standard pronunciation that people can understand, as much in the Latin. But certainly in vernacular. If somebody comes up there and chants, these are very simple chant tones, and you can't hear it, like you can't understand the words, something's wrong. Yeah, most priests, he says, as a Latin speaker, this is something I suffer with many priests whose Latin enunciation. Yeah, all of them. almost all of them, with a few exceptions. I've known. Yeah, Ethan, you're very behind. Ethan says I'm 2 hours behind. Yeah, enjoy. I can understand the other lectures change, just not one of them, but I can. So this, oh, by the way, on chanting the readings, I'm not going over it this time. So here's the problem with chanting the readings in vernacular. At my parish, we have one priest who will chant the English readings, but his accent is so bad. I love him. He's a great man. His accent is so bad that it doesn't help. And you can't correct. I've tried. It's very difficult territory. You can't correct the priest. It's a problem. So that's one issue. The second issue is, it seems to me as a matter of form that you cannot go first reading chanted, second reading not chanted, gospel chanted. That seems aesthetically flawed, just as a matter of performance. I think you could maybe get away with first reading recited, second reading chanted, gospel chanted. I don't think you can do Old Testament chanted, epistle not chanted, gospel chanted. So some of the problem I run into in ordinary parish settings, and I've been thinking about this, and you just would have to, this is totally whole part of training. Yeah, deacons, that's deacons. We'll talk about deacons in a minute. The problem with getting the readings chanted at Mass is not so much that there's never somebody who can do it. It's that it's usually one guy who can do it, and then the second reader won't be able to do it. And it's not, you can have him do everything, but it is usually proper that the first reading be one person and the second reading be another person. And if that's the case, then it's going to be hard. So you have to really work. So I would say that if you have a lector program, chant is like the capstone on the whole thing. You've really achieved something. Let's see. Somebody says, oh, hold on. If your listeners are all Anglophones, you must use traditional English pronunciation. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Where's that terrible? But if you don't know this, and I can't find the clip, I think God struck it from YouTube, but there was a traditional English pronunciation. And it was the British guy. I was listening to him, and he literally said, let me remember it. In nomine patrae, in nomine patre et filii et spiritui sancte, or sancte. It was terrible. I wish I could find it. Okay, so Tristan says, I noticed the deacons seemingly never chant even when all of the other readings are chanted, which makes it weird that the gospel isn't chanted, but the others are. Yeah, the deacons don't. Dude, I don't know what it is. They go through deacon formation, which is, I don't know, like what, online school and a correspondence course. I don't know, online school and a certificate. I don't know what they're doing with them. And goodness gracious, I don't know. I guess they invest all their skill points in unfolding the stuff on the altar and folding it back up again, because I have never seen one that can chant. They can usually read okay, and they can't chant, every single one of them. Deacons, when you tell them they should be chanting the prayers of the faithful, yeah, that I've only ever seen a deacon do that at the Vatican. Oh yeah, so the deacon has invested all his skill points in unfolding the cloth on the altar giving football analogies for the homily, and holding the chalice up. He's real good at. They hold the stuff up. That's his big moment. Hold the thing up. And then then some deacons can do the incense of the gospel, okay, and then they're a mess when they go to incense the people, an absolute mess. All of my people came late. See, all of my audience came late. I've now suddenly got I've got my regulars, but they came at 2 a.m. Okay. Well, anyway, we've done some. Oh yeah, injecting local sports team thing. All right, we've done some chat. Just back and forth. I've showed you sort of the basics of prep. And maybe we can do some more in the future, but and I'll see what my comments are on this video in the future. But I think this is a good sort of rudimentary, how to do XYZ, and then we'll see what people say in the comments and work from there. We're going to end the chat here, I think. So God bless. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much. And go into your parishes and work on fixing this stuff. Oh yeah, I didn't talk about that. Yeah. So look, if you're active at your parish, especially if you're a younger person, push to fix these things because it's a major part of the mass. So you gotta, step 1 is get on the rolls for readers and be a regular one. And then step 2 is to begin to push for improvements, like along the lines of what I'm talking about. That's an important thing I didn't talk about. But anyway, we'll let you go. I'm going to go. We're 2.5 hours in, which is way too long for this topic. And I'll see you next time.